At the end of a final job interview, the elderly chairwoman slid an old photograph across the table. In it, a young woman held an infant. The young woman was So-yeon's mother. And just below the baby's left ear was a mark. The same mark So-yeon had carried her whole life, without ever wondering where it came from. My hand wouldn't stop trembling. The interview room had gone completely silent. The executives who had been flipping through documents, the quiet scratching of pens, all of it had stopped. Time felt suspended. No, it felt like something inside me had suspended. Some inner mechanism, grinding to a halt. I couldn't take my eyes off the photograph. My mother's face, young, hair falling past her shoulders. Her expression lighter than any I had seen in her in years. But the look behind her eyes that I recognized. Heavy, quietly sorrowful, pressed down, held in. The same look I had grown up with and never known how to name. The older woman in the photograph stood beside my mother. I raised my eyes slowly from the photo, and looked across the table at the chairwoman. The decades had added lines and silver, but the shape was the same. The set of the eyes. The particular line of the mouth. "You're in this photograph," I said. My voice was almost nothing. The chairwoman said nothing. She simply watched me. Another tear traced the side of her face. She didn't wipe it away. So-yeon. Just my name. That was all. But something in the way she said. It reached me somewhere below words, the way you feel a sound more than hear it. This was not how an interviewer addresses a candidate. This was the voice of someone who had been holding a name inside them for a very long time, and was only now allowing it out into the open air. One of the executives quietly rose and closed the door to the hallway. No one spoke. The chairwoman slowly moved around the table toward me. I didn't know whether to stand or stay seated. I stayed. She stopped in front of me, and for a moment, she simply looked at my face. The way someone looks at something they have been searching for, and cannot quite believe they are seeing. Then she raised a trembling hand toward the side of my face, just below my left ear. Her fingertips stopped just before touching. "It's really you," she said quietly. I didn't understand yet how much time was held inside those 4 words. Her name was Margaret Whitfield, founder of the Whitfield Group, its largest shareholder. In business circles, there was no one who didn't know her name. She was known for being precise, principled, a woman who did not let emotion show. That afternoon, she and I sat across from each other in a small sitting room adjoining the executive floor. The city stretched out beyond the window. Autumn light came through the glass, and lay long and pale across the table between us. 2 cups of tea had been placed in front of us. Neither of us touched them. She began to speak. She told me about my mother. My mother's name was Myung-hee, Margaret's only daughter. From the time she was small, she was sharp and stubborn. Margaret said this with the faintest upward pull at the corner of her mouth. Something between pride and grief. At 23, my mother had fallen in love. A man without means, without a family name that carried any weight. Margaret had refused, firmly, and then more firmly still. My mother had married him anyway, over every objection. And that was where the fracture began. "I believed I was right," Margaret said. Her voice dropped. "At the time, the marriage had not lasted. My father left when I was 2 years old. My mother had raised me alone from that point forward. And Margaret she had known. She had watched from a distance as her daughter's life became harder. And she had not called. Had not come. Pride, she said. Or perhaps fear. She still wasn't certain which. After the divorce, Myung-hee moved. New address. New phone number. I tried to find her. More than once. Her hands rested on the table, and I watched them slowly close. But she didn't want to be found. I understood that. And still I only wanted to see my granddaughter once. Just once. I thought about a day in elementary school, when the teacher asked the class to draw their families. My classmates drew mothers, fathers, grandparents, cousins. I drew one figure. Just my mother. The teacher asked if I didn't have a grandmother. I said no. I had thought I was telling the truth. She had been here, in this city, all along. That evening, I called my mother. She would have been getting ready for her overnight shift. Tying on her apron, checking her phone. One last time before heading out the door. I knew that routine by heart. Mom. Oh, so Ian. How did the interview go? The same voice. Warm, a little tired, already thinking about what I had or hadn't eaten that day. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear and couldn't speak for a moment. Mom, I met grandmother today. At the interview. Silence on the other end. What did you say? The chairwoman of Whitfield Group. Margaret Whitfield. She had a photo of you. Of both of us. When I was a baby. A long silence followed. I heard my mother draw breath slowly. Then I heard her let it out, not all at once, but in pieces, the way someone exhales when something they have been holding for a very long time is finally allowed to move. Mom? I understand. That was all she said. The call ended. I sat for a long time looking at the dark screen in my hand. And then I cried. I'm not sure I could have explained exactly why. It was as though something that had been buried deep and covered over for years had finally been given permission to surface. And it came up all at once. 3 days later, Margaret reached out to me. She wanted to meet. A quiet tea room near the office. Someone she wanted to see. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a seat by the window, facing the door. My mother walked in. She was wearing a simple winter coat, her hair tucked behind one ear. Exactly as I had seen her 100 times before. But today, something in the way she moved was different. Her shoulders seemed narrower, her steps slower, as though each one carried weight. She scanned the room. Then she found Margaret, seated at a table near the far wall. She stopped. Margaret did not rise. She sat very still and looked at my mother across the room. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The other patrons carried on their quiet conversations, unaware. I held my breath. My mother took a step forward. That one step. It held 10 years. Margaret rose then, slowly, to her feet. My mother didn't stop walking. When she finally reached her, she broke. Not loudly. There were no words, no cry. Her shoulders fell, and something went out of them. That had been held rigid for a very long time. And Margaret gathered her in. Watching them, I felt something shift inside me. Something I had carried without knowing I was carrying it. All those years I hadn't understood why my mother went quiet in certain moments. Why she never spoke of where she came from. Why she sometimes stood at the window in the evening, looking at nothing, until I came and stood beside her. And she would blink and smile and ask if I was hungry. She had been carrying this alone. The whole time. Things changed slowly after that. My mother and Margaret began exchanging messages. Then calls, then occasional meals together. It wasn't easy. 10 years of silence doesn't repair in a season. There were moments when words ran out, when old pain surfaced. When one of them would go quiet without warning. But they kept returning to each other. And that was what mattered. I received my offer from Whitfield Group. Margaret told me the hiring decision had been made by the department head before she knew who I was. I believed her. My first morning, I rode the elevator to the 20th floor and watched the numbers climb. I didn't close my eyes. I felt not the absence of nerves, but a different kind. Not the trembling of fear. The trembling of someone walking toward something. The doors opened, passing the executive floor on my way to my desk. I noticed that the door to the chairwoman's office was slightly ajar. I didn't look in, but I heard her voice low, unhurried, and warm in a way I had not expected the first time I heard it. She was on the phone. Yes. Did you eat? Good. It's cold today. Make sure you wear something warm. She was talking to my mother. I slowed my steps for just a moment. Then I kept walking. I still think about that morning sometimes. Walking through that door knowing nothing. The chairwoman's eyes flickering when she first saw me. The sound of a pen hitting the floor. The worn edges of a photograph, soft from years of being carried close. I went to that building looking for a job. I came home with a family. None of it was planned. None of it was something I could have prepared for. I simply knocked on what I thought was the last door I had left, and what opened was not the door I had been hoping for. It was the one I had needed all along. Maybe that is how it works sometimes. When we are most desperate. And we knock anyway, what opens is not what we wanted. But what we were always missing. What So-yeon found in that interview room was not a career. It was the part of her story that had been waiting to be told. And what Margaret had searched for across 10 long years was not an apology. It was only this to hold her daughter again. Not out of pride. Out of love. Thank you for staying with So-yeon's story all the way to the end. If it resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe. And share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time.